Welcome back to Thriving in the Age of Disruption, hosted for you by Dr. Ramesh Ramachandra. In part 2 of this episode, we're in the middle of our conversation with Dr. Kevin Cheong, Managing Partner of Syntegrate, Executive Director of Sentosa 4D Adventureland, and Chairman of the Association of Singapore Attractions. In part 1, previous to this, Dr. Ramesh and Dr. Cheong have explored the entrepreneurial mindset with you and his various roles as a sales and marketing corporate executive at Sentosa, tourism consultant, and also as an investor. In this part 2, we're now going to jump into another facet of Dr. Cheong, and that is Dr. Cheong as a mentor in his family business, guiding succession planning to ensure the third generation are engaged and prepared, and what some of the challenges and secrets of building a successful family business are. Dr. Cheong will also share how he's overcome crisis in his life in a resilient manner, including facing death as a young teenager and what spirituality means to him today. So let's join Dr. Ramesh as she seeks to understand Dr. Kevin Cheong.
Great. Kevin, I want to sort of do a deep dive to understand a little bit more about your role as a mentor in the family business, specifically in terms of how you have engaged with the next generation. And, it's been like a couple of year engagement that you've had because you're sort of setting milestones for them in terms of how they're going to do succession plan. You're creating for them the confidence of being the next generation who can take the original family business to the next level itself. So, as well as you're building trust between the different parties who are possible successors so that it doesn't really matter who becomes the leader, because all the rest have also been developed and all the rest of the next generation are equally successful.
Well, okay. I mean, as much as I try to guide them, it's also a group decision. I need to specify that. But
you had the buy-in from the board, the older generation.
Well, yeah, yes. Well, let's put it this way, right? And this is not just my family business, but I think it happens to every family business, especially when it gets past the first generation, it gets into the second generation is still okay. Why? Because between the first generation and second generation, the second generation would have grown up together. Okay, they will have the same dining table. They will be living in the same house in the first place because they're brothers and sisters.
Yes.
Right? Then when it comes to the third generation, the brothers and sisters have their own families, okay, and they live in separate houses. The third generation hardly play together. They're called cousins, right? And and the temperament, the character, and the upbringing will start to change. Okay. But at the same time, when the third generation and the fourth generation starts coming into the business, it's an exponential growth of number of people coming into the business. But there's no exponential growth in the business to share.
Yes.
So that's where many businesses, family businesses on the third and fourth generation becomes an issue. Okay. That's my theory. And I'm thinking that first, they are not as intimately connected with each other than before. Second is because of that, they may have different upbringing, styles of management and interests altogether, right? And the very important issue would also be the business did not grow exponentially to feed more the exponential number of people coming into the business, okay? And hence, it's likely to break down. Okay, there will be comparisons between siblings, children, okay, and that's where we will have issues. So the idea here is to have the third generation come on board with new business development, okay, ideas to grow that rice bowl first, okay, and that actually hones in their entrepreneurial skills or entrepreneurial mindset. Because we must not forget that what brought the first generation to the second generation is entrepreneurship, right?
Yes.
Whether the circumstances, whatever forced you to be an entrepreneur, that's besides the point. The fact that you took risks and invested something, borrowed money to start something is very important. And because the patriarch or matriarch every day having lunch, dinner, breakfast with the second generation, that kind of rubs off to them. Right?
Yes.
The third generation, some of them could be very probably more scholarly, probably because life's better, all right? They didn't have
Yes.
hardships, for example. So I
That's
think at the early onset of them coming into the business, they need to learn how to grow the business, but they also need to know that they need to make decisions, as much as also stick to the knitting of collective decision making. And I think that is also a major issue in family businesses, right? We make decisions based on relationships, based on gut feel, more than based on professional and independent outlook in many things, right?
Yes.
So I think that is how we have embarked on for the third generation to grow the business when they come in and let them be emperors and kings of their own little kingdoms, right? But at the same time, give them opportunities to sharpen their entrepreneurial skills and mindset and develop trophies for themselves. Right. And that,
Yes.
I think, is a very important aspect so that the entrepreneurial mindset prevails, and not forget that that was what made us successful, right? As an SME.
Yes, that's right. Kevin, you've described the key tension point in a family business. I like to describe it as the tension that comes about because of transgenerational legacy. And I'm going to use Gersig's three-dimensional model of family business development to describe the three components. The first tension comes about because of the life cycle of the business system. You know, a business starts from a startup phase and it evolves to a mature stage. And whilst it's doing that, the industry is also growing. So what happens is that there is a constant need to evaluate and to ensure that the organizational structure, the products and services, the delegation rights, and the decentralization of controls are being updated throughout this journey. The second piece that is also evolving during this time is the family system. Now, this is interesting because, there is a point in time when the original founder started the business, and most times their own family at this point is also young kids. But then as the business is growing, the children are also growing. And at some point, the children come on board into the firm. And then you have a stage where the next generation and the original founders are working together. And finally, you come to a stage where the founder says, okay, you know what, I'm ready to retire and I'm going to pass it on to the next generation. So at this stage, whilst it is a final stage of passing on the baton, what's happening, however, is that throughout this journey, we have to keep observing and we have to keep updating the kinds of communication that happens, the roles that each individual plays as a family member, and the expectation that's there for people as they grow up into a family business. The last piece is sort of connected to the family system, and it's called the ownership system. And this is more the transition of the legal ownership, because in the beginning, it's a founder who is the controlling owner, and he or she is the one who creates the business. Therefore, they get to set the culture and the strategy and the values of the business. But then once their children come on board, their children are now considered the sibling partnership. And, at this stage, usually there is an update in terms of the existing policies and practices, and new techniques are introduced into the company. And as the children themselves have their own children grow up and are ready to join the business, we now move into what we will call typically as the cousin consortium. And this is where typically the third generation comes on board. And what you see when they come on board is that, it could trigger all kinds of changes because people are looking at succession planning. People are looking at the dynamics between the business and the family. People are looking at the power structure and the power levels between the executives and the non-executive shareholders. And also people are looking at the company's financial demands. So the bottom line is that any change in any one of these three dimensions can actually impact the family succession planning. It can impact the enlistment of the second and third generation, or even changes in the ownership structure. But the family business, which is able to anticipate such events and its potential pitfalls, are more likely to prepare themselves with preventive measures and cope with disruption. And I think, Kevin, just as you shared from your own family business's experience, the key to ensuring is really that A, the business is growing as the family grows, and B, that you're onboarding the next generation, which means that they have the right experience and the right training to be able to grow the business during their lifetime. Is there anything else that you might want to say in terms of, an advice to SMEs who are looking at this space, or in terms of succession planning? What could be an ideal way in which the founders or the second generation can look at this?
Yes, especially from the angle of complacency and how that prevents risk-taking. In a poll by QB Insurance, only 14% of small and medium-sized enterprises in Singapore intend to expand overseas, while almost half have no interest in taking their business beyond Singapore anytime soon. Now, that means 86% of our SMEs are not looking to expand their business outside of the local market.
Well, complacency kills entrepreneurship. Right. And I studied finance. It's quite interesting, right? We've got a saying in finance that what made you successful today is not what will continue to do so into the future. Yes, in terms of activities and business models, that's where I think the entrepreneur patriarch, for example, right, he was never satisfied with how he's doing things. He's always bombarded by competition, price wars, and fluctuations in supply chain or whatever it might be, right? And he was always seeking out new ways. And that, I think, is the fundamental of SME entrepreneurship mindset. Right? Never being satisfied with what you have, always asking, is there a better way to do things? Is there a better business I should go out for? What else can I do with my $100,000 other than keeping in a bank or investing in the same business? How can I grow my business? How can I diversify from this particular risk? Complacency is that important thing, right? That stops us from exercising risk-taking.
Wow. So, and how can people develop a skill which keeps them open and curious and, willing to test out new ideas? Because in some ways, when you live in a country like Singapore, where everything has been planned for, everything has been thought out, how do entrepreneurs actually go out there and seek new opportunities? Because at some level, when I work, I don't work in Singapore. I work largely with our clients in ASEAN countries, and I find them to be very open and very entrepreneurial. And in the limited interactions that I've had with Singaporean entrepreneurs, I found them to be very driven by what the government is saying as the key message, or the grants that they are getting to invest in digitalization, or the PIC grant, or even now, you have a grant to hire new people. But then it's not directed internally from them seeking the opportunity. So, what do you think about that?
Okay, I'll share with you what I said to many people in the tourism business, okay, for the past 1.5 years. If you need to wait for the GSS, government grant and handouts to stay profitable, I think you should give up becoming an entrepreneur, right? And that goes against risk-taking, right? If you need that grant to break even and make money, I think there's a serious problem in your business model in the first place, because you have not fixed the business model of whether it's elastic costs, and with zero income, you should actually be going into hibernation mode. I'm sorry. And that's what I've been telling many tourism businesses since March last year, 2020, right? And I agree that in many cases in Singapore, many of our entrepreneurs are looking for an end game with government grants or some special IPO buyout spec or whatever, right? To get your multiples of 30x, 50x, or whatever X, right? And I think that's where we have a serious problem, right? Because we're fixated with things like this, right? Rather than I have a great idea and I believe there's a market out there. Okay. Well, let me share with you a friend of mine. He's also one of my mentors, and many of them are in the 70s. I don't know why I'm mixing around with such old people. But anyway.
That could be your secret recipe.
Maybe. And let me share with you. His name is Jerry Rodriguez. And he founded Gull Technologies in the 90s. He did a management buyout and then listed the company and made $1 gazillion out of that, right? And then after that, he sold out the company. He retired gainfully many years back. And then suddenly he called me up and then we invest together. We do a lot of stuff together, funny things together. I can't. There are a lot of secrets out there. Anyway, and Jerry being a Eurasian, right, and he studies Malay, right, in school. Suddenly had a chance upon an opportunity to kind of revamp a electronics manufacturer, a huge electronics manufacturer in Hong Kong and China. He doesn't speak a word of Chinese or Cantonese. He jumped into the deep end, went there and cleaned up the company, and I believe he listed the company and made another bundle there. Wow. Now, this is where I think he didn't look at, it's a different environment. I can't do this. I don't speak Chinese. I don't read Chinese. But he actually went in there and jumped in the deep end. And he told me that because he was in that environment, his senses were completely aroused. He was suspicious to everything. He had to find out every stuff, right? And that was in his 50s. So I think that's the part which I talked about complacency, right? Jumping in the deep end, making sure that you don't dull your senses and dull your antennas, right? But rather lengthen them, feel it, be more sensitive. And that, I think, is a very important part of not being complacent, always trying.
Yes. And it's not like relating to your life as a destination, but really it's a journey. And that you're constantly learning and trying out new things, and that's an important trait to develop.
Yes, yes, and I mean that's where I think many many entrepreneurs need to remind themselves that was their secret to success, right? Before they arrived. The problem is when they arrived, what happened?
Yeah,
they forgot how they arrived.
Yeah, they sort of became comfortable and built their mansion.
Well, yeah, and get their Rolls Royces, get their drivers and 25 maids and stuff like that, right? And life became easy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But you're actually pointing to something very interesting here. And it's got to do with our own self-actualization as human beings. Because, if you look at our journey, there is a time when accomplishment and a time when, what we achieved was measured in tangible form, especially in financial ways. And then as we grew older, the opportunity to be engaged, like just now, your story of your mentor, was more from the ability to pass on your learning or your ability to still demonstrate that you can go in and do something as what you had done before is important. And this is an important piece because, people are talking about ageism these days, and maybe I have another 10 years before I sort of get into that struggle for myself, whereby, I become a digit in terms of how old I am and not the kind of value or the contribution I could make or the skill sets or the experience that I have. So what do you think about this whole place where we are actually throwing away this whole wealth of knowledge from experienced people? And we're saying, they should retire and they should be at home when actually they can contribute a lot, even in this new world and in this new business model in terms of platform businesses as well as other investments that you're seeing today.
Well, I think, yes, comes back to the word complacency, right?
Also.
But if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, at the right at the bottom is physiological needs, then social and safety needs, right? That's very tangible. And as you move up, become social self-esteem, you find that beyond tangible quantitative needs, it starts becoming more and more qualitative, intangible, but it's about people around you. But right at the top, when we talk about self-actualization, it's no longer about these things. You'll find that at that moment, right, of enlightenment, okay, the achieving your nirvana, okay, is really about you and your maker and you about what is life after death. Okay, yes. So, and then yes, it sounds morbid. Okay, it sounds really morbid. But I think it is about finding a deeper self, right?
Yes.
So, and as entrepreneurs, yes, we're driven by the quantitative. Okay, if you look carefully at how that mirrors this whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? As an entrepreneur at the age of 20, 25 years old, he starts his business, he drives for big money, right? Materialism is all very, very quantitative. right? Very tangible. Once he reaches a certain stage, it's about recognition. It's about the size of his car, right? And the size of his house. What does he wear? Where does he go for his holidays, right? And which part of the aeroplane does he travel in, right? Front part or the back part, right? And stuff like that. And then what is the back tag on your luggage, right? Do you have a PPS on it? Or PPS? No. I'm a solitaire, right? I'm a live PPS, big deal, right? And then suddenly to this point, and we kind of continue in this, but we never reach self-actualization. We're always at the self-esteem. Why? And I think it is about not being focused on what we need, rather than we are very focused on what we want, right? And they forget that what brought them to where they are is about this whole issue of never being satisfied, right?
Yes. Super. Okay, I'm going to move to a next conversation. Kevin, what was that key crisis that you dealt with? And, is there that one thing that you wish you did differently about that?
Wow. Okay, I mean, crisis, I think I've got two, I think. One was at a very young age, I got into an accident, okay? I got an accident and they kind of opened up my skull and I had hemorrhage and then, I got 42 stitches. I had 42 stitches on my head and I went through 4 surgeries on my head and every school holiday, I literally had to go back to Tan Tock Seng Hospital and I probably would have lost my life if not for a surgeon by the name, he's dead actually, sorry, Dr. Gopal Bharatam, who saved my life, okay? And I think that one is, yes, is a personal crisis, but because during that time, this was in the early 80s, okay, there was only one neurosurgery ward in the whole of Singapore at Tan Tock Seng Ward 33, right? And it's a common ward, okay? And you could see all kinds of, I saw death, right? I saw death right in front of me. I saw people coming in with all kinds of neuro issues, right? It could come from fights, it could be from whatever. And that really opened up my eyes and got very close to death, right? And I saw death around me.
How old were you?
I was like 13 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, it was from an accident, and of course, I tell all the girls, right? It came from a fight, Okay, it sounds more, it sounds a lot more heroic, Okay, sexy, okay, more glamorous. But of course, it's just a bicycle accident, Anyway, that's the truth. So that I think in that crisis, I pulled through, but that also made me look at life very differently.
Of course, facing death at that age.
Yes. Correct. Right? Yeah, and death, not just for myself, but and at that moment, actually, you don't realize death for yourself because at 13 years old, you don't know what is life and death, right? Yes. The concept, but you saw death around you. Okay, and like I said, for that 1 year, I went to the hospital 4 times. For my surgery, I would go back and stay there for a week or even 10 days and come out. And so I could see also people who were still in the ward and people who have gone back, left us, right? And the nurses are still there and they would tell me, the other guy who used to sleep next to you, sadly he had to go, right? And stuff like that. So it was very, very traumatic in that sense. Right. So that's one. And that changed my outlook in life tremendously. Then about 11 years ago, my wife was diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and it was very aggressive. And at that moment, I think I was opening a restaurant. And at the same time, I was managing a regional company for a Japanese company. All these things coming at the same time. I mean, I don't know what pulled through. I mean, and I was blessed with a lot of strength and a lot of focus to ensure that daytime I go to work, get my daughter to school, hop over to the hospital, look at my wife being okay, then come back to office, get things done, evening, go back and see her. And it just went on and on for a month or so. Yeah, I think that was a personal crisis, a family crisis, but it also made me realize that with focus, with resolution, you can get things done, right? I could have chosen to go to a coffee shop and mope about everything.
Yeah.
Right? I could have done that. I could have gone there and say, why me? Why this? Why that? I think I didn't have time to even think about that. And I had a very supportive boss then in the Japanese company. His name is Mr. Takenaka. I respect him tremendously for that. And he gave me a lot of support.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. It's really interesting. You flagged out 3 words, how you were able to navigate that crisis because you brought focus, you were able to tap into your inner strength and sort of like be resolute to get the things that you needed to do and handle in your life, because life goes on, whether it's the job or looking after your daughter, in spite of that other crisis that you had to deal with. Now if you look back, right, how did you develop those skills? How did you develop those traits? Was it from that experience that you had in facing death at 13 and having those 4 surgeries? Is that what you actually developed at that point?
I don't think that it is one particular activity or incident or event that shapes a person. Well, I do meditation every day, about 7 hours. It's called sleep.
You're funny.
Rapid eye movement.
I like that definition.
I spend a lot of time thinking, right? And especially Sundays. Then Sundays are my thinking time, right? And it's not so much for myself, but really about putting on the rear view mirror and say, okay, last week, what has happened? Why couldn't I achieve certain things that I wanted to do? Okay. And say, no, let's put that on the priority list and get it done. Right. And I do that I've been doing that for many years and thinking about that. Okay. And I think that's one. Second thing is I have a saying that people will ask me certain questions, and I always state that, you know what, I'm the most stupid guy in this room. But I want you to know one thing. I'm the most hardworking guy here. Right? So in that sense, that if I'm not complacent with what I have and what I know, I'm always thinking that I need to be more hardworking. Number 2, tries harder. Right? And I think that is an attitude that I've had for a long time. So to say that there is a particular event that has shaped me in that focus, I think it is this constant retrospective look of and kind of analyzing and evaluating what I've gone wrong, how can I have done it right, is a constant thing, okay? And that's the part which I think I am, well, in Singapore, there's a word for it. The word is paranoia, but in Singapore, it's called kiasu lah.
Or it could be just self-reflection, which is an awesome habit to have, because you do it, spot on every week. And you get to, auto adjust whatever that you need to focus on, and it's a timely feedback.
My wife calls me a planner, okay? I plan for things that hopefully doesn't happen. I plan for things that may not happen, and the worst might happen, right? And I am very, very risk averse in that sense. You'll be surprised. Okay, I'm very risk averse. I'm very uncertainty adverse or avoidance person. I hate uncertainty. I hate changes in plans. So my only way of dealing with surprises is to anticipate surprises and plan for them.
That's right.
So when they come, because if I plan for the surprises, it's no longer a surprise, right? It's an anticipation.
That's right. You've done a good job of, becoming very skilled at that, because you probably have reduced the highest levels of uncertainty, and now you can actually have a life which is somewhat stable, right? Or within your control or your experience of having control.
Yeah, I'm a control freak. In a sense, yes, I am.
I mentioned earlier that I was writing a book on crisis-ready mindset. It should be ready sometime in March of 2022. And in the book, I talk about 4-step crisis-ready mindset. And it essentially refers to the different kinds of thinking that one has and how it also matches our inner state at that point. So if you look at a crisis or a setback or a problem that you're dealing with, you could say that you're going to go through 4 stages or 4 steps. The first step is called awareness. And that in this step, we need to have a kind of thinking which allows us to reflect or introspect about the situation. And this is important, and sometimes it can be counterintuitive, because in this particular stage, we are actually reacting to that setback. We are reacting to that negative outcome. We are reacting to the emotions that we are experiencing from that setback or the trauma. And so it takes something to reflect, it takes something to introspect, but that's an important piece. The second step is all about acceptance. And so the thinking that you need to have at this point is, what can allow me to accept my role in this situation? What is it that I did, or what is it that I didn't do? And that really opens up for you to be able to move your inner state from that of reaction to reflection. And it's a critical stage because it's only at this point that we can come to what I would call as the midpoint of the pendulum swing. On the one end, it is reaction, and the middle point, it is reflection. And of course, the other end is creation. So the third step is action. And this action requires a thinking that supports us to take and do action. And like I mentioned before, now the pendulum has moved. The pendulum of our inner thoughts and our inner feelings has moved from reflection to creation. So we are ready to take action. The last step is called actualization. And it's a thinking which allows us to be able to appreciate the fulfillment as well as the urgency of taking those actions. When we look at taking the action, we need to have a goal in mind, like another future, an emerging future. And when we are on actualization, we see that, oh, wow, although the journey was long or hard and it was unpredictable, we've actually managed to alter the outcome from the first moment when we realized that we had a setback. So typically, these are the 4 steps: awareness, acceptance, taking action, and actualization. Yeah. Okay, so I've got 2 more questions. I wanted to ask you, what is spirituality? How would you describe spirituality for you? How do you practice that?
Many years back, I was actually quite involved in the church. I'm a Catholic and my whole family is Catholic, 3 generations or 4 generations. And I had this conversation with a couple of priests, okay? And I said, well, and my question is this, okay, that we pray and we exalt God, okay, as the Almighty, right? The omnipresent. Then I said, could it have been possible that God came down, spoke to 8 people, right? And 8 people had a different reflection of what God was. And 8 of them actually went on to practice God in their own way, right? And it actually became 8 different religions today. And of course, the priest looked at me and one of them actually started telling me, no, that's wrong. That's not the doctrine, and all that, okay? Another one looked at me, and both of them are still alive, okay? I'm not going to mention their names because... and because, they are now no longer just priests, okay? They are higher ups, okay? They have changed from Reverend Father to something else, okay? So they are somebody, okay? So, and one of them actually sat me down and had a very meaningful, almost 2-hour discussion on that. Okay. And he actually agreed that maybe God is so almighty that he could have done that. So I personally, in terms of spirituality, to me, there are 2 definitions to spirituality. One is religion-based and the other one is really about state of mind. Okay. So I believe first and foremost for religions that all good religions are actually a reflection of the same God. We have a different interpretation. And if we know the Bible at the day of Pentecost, Holy Spirit came down and everyone spoke in tongues. Okay. If that could have happened, why can't my theory could have happened too? Okay. Yes. So that's what I believe in. Because if you look carefully at all the religions, they all happen around about the same time, around about the same region, okay? And all talking about fundamentally the same way of life, okay? A way of behavior, all right? So my concept of religion is actually a control of behavior, okay? Which then comes to the second part of a state of mind. I believe it is spirituality, to me, is about you and the concept of what is life after death, if there is one, okay? And what are you going to do about it now? That to me is my definition of spirituality. It is an investment into the unknown. Okay. And the beauty of this is whatever you invest in materially ain't gonna be able to be cashed out in the unknown world. And I believe that the unknown world is actually future generations of how you have shaped your family, how you have shaped society, how you shaped your own ecosystem or your social circles or your community. Okay. And that leaves a lasting legacy of doing good.
Yes.
Okay. And I think the legacy of not who you are, what you've done, but what you've started so that it continues this whole doing good. And I think that investment goes into the unknown. And the unknown is not a state of death, but a state of other people's lives in the future.
Right. So it's like the impact that you leave with the future generations.
Correct. And so my thinking and what drives me every day is what will my daughter, I have only one daughter, what will my daughter and my good friends, close friends, supposedly, right, say in my eulogy? Probably. But because at that moment I'm dead, right? I'm kind of halfway through the furnace, not really in the furnace yet, but I can't do anything to you.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't give you $1. I can't give you a cent. My will is written already. I can't do squat about it. Yep. What are you going to say about me? I think that with no repercussions, no consequences, that to me is spirituality.
Yes. You know.
Sorry, I don't know whether you expected this answer.
Actually, Kevin, it sort of resonates with what I, relate to as spirituality as well. And you've sort of made it so easy for people to understand it in terms of a day-to-day living experience versus, there is this thing that you have to do, whether it's a ritual or whether it is a practice. But, if I was living life on a day-to-day, moment by moment, and then I had that enduring thought about how each of these actions or how should I shape these actions because there is a possible impact out there with people and the environment and the world, then now I become conscious about that thought. I become conscious about the action and I become conscious about the result, right?
Well, okay, this is the way we look at, okay? Look at when we're young. Okay, I know we're still young, of course, but when we were younger, okay, we can't wait to get older, right? We can't wait to be an adult, right? We can't wait that, if only I can have achieved this, right?
Yes.
Time kind of goes, this perception of time becomes very slow, right?
Correct.
But as you go older, once you get past the middle point of 40, 45, it's almost halfway point. When you get older, time kind of gets faster.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. But so that was one context. The other context is when we were young, when we did things, you didn't know what happened. So you're doing things and then the result comes, you say, so how do I reach this result? Okay. But as you're older, the perspective of what we do kind of is in some form of slow motion. Okay. The time taken to do those things is the same, but you kind of can see what is going to happen next. Although our sense of time is faster, but the way we do things, our perception of time becomes slower. That is that state, which I think is very interesting. Okay. The concept of time.
Yes.
Right. And so I think as we get older, we need to slow down. Okay. And really to reflect about not just myself, but the people around us. Right. And I have a saying that I'm not the Singapore government's best friend. Okay, in a sense, right? I criticize, I comment, I come up with suggestions, okay? And yes, sometimes I'm in a position to do so, not because I'm an opposition, not because I'm a radical, but because I love my country, okay? I think that's important. So in that sense, I think and people say, so you have got so many comments about government, okay? What are you doing about it? So in my little circle of Singapore attractions and tourism, I try to practice and influence what I think should be done. And not that I'm against the government, but I think this is something I should practice what I preach and not go around bitching about it. Right? And that's the problem with Singaporeans. We bitch too much. Do something about it.
Yeah, and we don't walk the talk.
Yeah, and we're always saying, right, some other country is doing better than us, especially in these COVID times, all kinds of stuff. I say, yeah, okay. Now then put yourself in the shoe of the minister who have to make the decision, right? It is not an easy decision.
That's right. I mean, on hindsight, right, we can all talk about it. But in that moment to make a decision into reality because you don't know what that future outcome is going to be, it takes courage. And
that is an entrepreneurial spirit. That is an entrepreneurial spirit, but the priorities are different now, right? Okay, and as an entrepreneur, you're doing it for yourself. As a politician, the risk taking is the greater good. And the greater good is not about satisfying 100%. It's about satisfying 51% or more. If the majority is okay, it's okay. And sometimes it's not about being okay. It's about doing the right thing.
That's a new perspective for me. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, it's like how Lee Kuan Yew and the first generation of leaders, right? And I don't think they won a popularity contest. They had to build an economy as survival, right? Whether it was Goh Keng Swee, Toh Chin Chai, Rajaratnam, or Lee Kuan Yew himself, E.W. Barker, Hon Sui Sen, right? They made really difficult decisions, right? And it was not a popularity contest.
Yeah, that's right. And that's what you have to do to be above, it being just about you and your popularity or your party's survival.
No, it's a people's survival.
Yeah. Okay, on this note, I want to switch a little bit to looking at, if you had 3 words to describe what is thriving, how would you describe it?
I don't think thriving is a state, okay, of where we are in terms of, the word thriving actually comes from doing well, right? Okay,
yes.
or being superlative. I don't believe in that because I think it is 3 levels of society and people, right? One is about, like I said, surviving. Okay. Second state is, it's 2 words, is critical mass. Okay. Being in a state of tipping point. Okay. And then the third is the state of takeoff. Okay. Yes. Why? Because if you look again at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to many people, and I hope that Singaporeans and people who are listening to this podcast, and the fact that you're listening to a podcast, I believe you're not in that first state of surviving. I think you're at the state of at least that critical mass or tipping point. Okay? But we need to realize that there are many people who have been worse off than us, who are really worse than living from hand to mouth.
Right.
Okay? So at that state, at that level, thriving is really about surviving, isn't it?
Yes.
Right? Then comes people like most of us are in that state of critical mass or tipping point. We are kind of contented, but we want more. Okay, but we don't know. Actually, we are already in a state of doing okay.
Yes.
So our definition of thriving is not about food on the table, but the what if I had more? How can I get more? Okay. And then the third state, okay, is the takeoff, right? People like Elon Musk, they're already flying and soaring. To us, one step behind them, the people in the critical mass state will look at people like Elon Musk like saying, you're more than thriving. You are flying. You're soaring through the skies. But his state of mind is, I'm not there yet. I want to build something in space, right? So the concept of thriving has one, the context of the present, right? And the what if, and what does he have that I don't have? So I think that the term thriving is really subjective.
Yes.
Depending on what socio-economic status and circumstances you're at. So, sorry, I don't know whether I've given you the 3 words.
That's wonderful. I mean, thank you for sharing with us your thoughts around thriving. And it's been a really insightful interview, Kevin. And I thank you for your generous sharing throughout the session.
Well, we've covered some really interesting discussions and would love to hear from you on what you found useful and want more of in future episodes. Dr. Ramesh will be going deeper into the 4-step crisis model with our next guest speaker. So be sure to catch us in the upcoming podcast on crisis resilience. Our guest speaker will also be sharing some very personal stories about how she's overcome various crises in her life, like the failure to secure enough resources to continue driving an important social enterprise that she's painstakingly built, uprooting during the pandemic and crossing continents to return home to the US after having spent more than a decade away in Asia, leaving behind the work that she loves and her entire corporate network, All this in order to look after her beloved mother who's struggling with dementia. So if you're interested to hear how our next speaker faced these crises and how she took learnings and insights out of these difficult experiences, make sure you catch us in our next episode. Finally, if you're interested to learn more about what an entrepreneurial mindset is and how you can best develop and use it to improve your life, you can take the Entrepreneurial Qualifications Quiz to get your score on how much you have of some of these useful characteristics, which you can deploy in your own life for your benefit. So please be sure to click on the link below the podcast to get started on the Entrepreneurial Qualifications Quiz. Dr. Ramesh will also be happy to give you a copy, free, of a soon-to-be published book, The Big Jump into Entrepreneurship, Revisited 2022. All you have to do is click on the link below this podcast and register your email. If you're amongst the first 100 listeners to register, we'll send you the Big Jump into Entrepreneurship, Revisited 2022 book. Thank you once again for joining us today. Let us know if you have any questions for Dr. Ramesh and what you would like her and our guest speakers to discuss in future episodes by adding your comments below. Would love to hear from you. Thank you once again for your participation and do join us next time.